this is the third webinar. We will have next Wednesday the fourth webinar, and we will end this series of 4 webinars. And in the future, we can decide if we continue or not, then we will see according to your needs. So the today webinar is focused on the co-creation methods, particularly on how to select the methods and why methods can be useful for me as a facilitator in my journey as leading or facilitating the co-creation journey of the Living Lab community. So the program for today, it included, or it was foreseen, also the intervention of Antonio, but I think he is not with us. So maybe if we have time left, we can use that time to do an exercise through the Miro digital collaborative platform again, like we start in the previous meeting. So basically, it's about introduction to co-creation methods, the criteria for method selection, and aligning this method selection with the different steps of the co-creation journey that we already addressed in webinar number 1. And then we will give some details, not much, but some details on some particular methods. And also talk about the transversal methods in the sense that you can be using, for instance, design thinking along the co-creation journey. Design thinking is also a method or an approach, methodology that actually will require or will demand also the use of the other methods or tools that are more specific for the different stages or phases of the co-creation journey. Sorry, and then we will have Jonathan intervention, and then we, as usual, have a slot for clarifications, for questions, for comments from the participants. And as you know, these are very important for us because then can be shared with the other facilitators that for some reason could not attend. Some facilitators already reported, for instance, from Poland, they had classes, or sometimes there are overlapping meetings, and not always it's possible for all the facilitators to attend. So your questions will be useful for them too. So co-creation methods. We take attention to the time. Co-creation methods. It's basically tools that we can use to help us to ensure that co-creation is more than participation. Okay. Sometimes there is this strong idea that co-creation is just only about doing participatory workshops, but that's not it. That's not it. And I think now it's clear for you that it's not only it. And involves putting in practice different exercises, different actions, different activities that can be participated by all the Living Lab community, by groups of that community. It can be facilitators exercise for themselves or together in groups or teams. Each Living Lab has a team of facilitators, and in some cases, they can do the planning and use these tools also to plan the activities that they will put in place. Participation is involved in the sense that the community or part of the community, depending on the situation, will participate. But co-creation is more than that. It's involving, engaging, as we already have discussed in the previous 2 webinars. So the criteria for method selection that we have followed are criteria that are relatively established by the literature and also by the practice. It's currently quite established experience in living labs. Of course, living labs are still new, and we still need a lot of empirical evidence and information, especially in these specific living labs, territorial living labs, because the living labs were initially and are, of course, more developed, related with the companies, with the product development. So, of course, it's there is less evidence for territorial living labs. So, in our case, we will collect and contribute to the knowledge regarding the living labs, how they work, what is missing. So the criteria that we are considered or that we considered is the contextual fit. It's very important that you select methods that are adaptable to the local context and challenge, to the community, the persons, the place, the situation, the participatory depth. So it's important there is a depth in this participation. It's not just like being there, it's being involved. So meaningful engagement. Stage alignment, it means that you have to be aware, of course, these stages or phases can be blurred at some point, it can overlap. You can go back and forth. This is not a linear process, as we already discussed. But actually, different phases or different activities will entail different methods or tools. Then also the practical feasibility, if it is feasible to use, whether physical, digital. It's feasible to do it digital. Is the community able to participate? Physical has other challenges that are putting places in the same place at the same time. It's quite challenging. And evidence-based, that is proven effectiveness in sustainability projects. All the methods that we included in the toolbox, co-creation methods toolbox, are methods that are already used and experimented. So there is evidence that they work actually. So, as well, I was saying, co-creation is not just about participation. It's a structured journey that can be sometimes more messy, less messy, but actually for facilitators, it means to be planned and structured, where the ideas are shaped in real-world solutions through collaboration, testing, and continuous improvement. So this is a ladder, and of course, sometimes we can go back, go up. Basically, it's important to define the scope, to engage actors. I think it's already clear for all the facilitators, and the LivingSoiLL actually is already evolving through the ladder, facilitating activities. So today we will focus more on choose methods. Choose methods, of course, it's interconnected with other, especially the solutions, ideas, solutions. I think, for instance, it's currently happening a meeting with the Italian Living Lab that is very much focused, as far as I understood, on bring ideas and to try to understand if these ideas can be actually solutions. So regarding the stages, they have already presented during the webinar. I'll focus on the cooperation journey. So what you have to focus on: desirability, feasibility, and viability. If you use this moralistic approach called design thinking, and you plan your journey across the different stages, from being aware there is a problem space, a solution space, and then a deployment space when the solutions are already being scaling up, implemented and scaling up. And in each one of these spaces, there are different phases that can be overlapped, of course, but the problem space is much more about bringing the actors and stakeholders on board and give them the space, what we call in safe rooms, to actually bring the problems, frame the problems. And then in solution space, that some living labs are already working on solution space, but actually it's always interconnected with problem space. But in solution space, it's more about the co-design, the solutions that can be tested to be implemented, especially through the experimental sites. So experimental sites are very important for facilitators too, and they need to be connected with what is happening in these experimental sites. Then we have this table. It's apparently a very dense table, and it can be difficult to reach. But actually, you need to read it as a matrix. So in line or in a horizontal line, if you prefer, you have the stages. If you are focused on doing something to engage the actors and stakeholders. The project, of course, is advanced beyond that, but you might need to go back there, because you note that some actors or the actors are not engaging in the activities. So actually, you need to go back there. Then the understanding of local context, that I think that is a more easy stage for most of the facilitators, that they know the ground where they are working. Still, we should not overestimate our knowledge, and we need to be aware of specificities that we might not be aware before starting engaging the stakeholders and connecting them with the problems and solutions. Another important stage we already discussed, it is about the problems. So the Living Labs already have done participatory workshops to identify the problems, but actually it will be it's a short but still long period that will be at some point necessity to reframe the problems, to refine the problems. Also, new alternatives in terms of the solutions can be envisaged. It's already happening, as far as I understand. Maybe I'm wrong, but I guess that is happening now, because of course, when you put people together and the knowledge is moving, of course, new alternatives can be envisaged that were not envisaged in the beginning of the process. Then we have the stage of the ideate to give shape to the ideas for solutions, and then the process of real-life experimentation that is mostly happening in the experimental sites, but not only on experimental sites. So you need to be also attentive to experimentation from empirical, not so controlled, that can be also useful and can be shared in these more broad activities involving the Living Lab community, especially the users, the farms. It's very important that the users can follow what is going on the experimental sites. Not every day, of course, but you need to create some ways they are able to follow this. So this is the co-creation journey, and what we put here is the description of the co-creation, these different stages. Ready then? And then we suggest some methods. Okay, there are much more methods, but we already talk about the stakeholder mapping, for instance, even in a living lab that has now more than 1 year. For facilitators, it's very important to know very well their actors, their stakeholders, so the Living Lab community, that is a very important starting point. And then you can use also empathy maps, for instance, to bring on board the actors, stakeholders that can be more unaware or more distant or less interested, or it can be important to bring them. Okay, there is other tools for local context, and then there are important tools, and that it's important to use them to shape the problems, give a shape of the problems. Otherwise, you might have a very different understanding of the problems. So it's important, this stage is very important to create a collective understanding of which is the problem. And then for the ideas, there is this method, there are others, but for instance, the idea cards can be a way of giving the shape to a solution. And then, of course, there will be more than one solution that come up, and you need to help the community, the Living Lab community, to select the ideas. And then, of course, there are other stages that we are not still there, but for instance, it will be also part of the work of the working package 5. So working package 5 that is led by the University of Cheyenne will be very helpful also at this part of the process. That's why we didn't put much more here, because I think along the development of the working package 5, we will learn more about it. So in the third block, we put which are the expected outputs from each different stage. So actually, it's important to be aware of all the actors and stakeholders, to engage them. It's important to have the problem well defined and redefined, reframed when is needed, and to give the opportunity to the actors involved in the Living Lab to put in place their own ideas, to share their ideas, to account for all ideas. And then, of course, there is a need for selection, and that's what some Living Labs are doing, or not all, but some of them are already doing that process. This is more, of course, difficult process to select the solutions to be tested, and then these solutions can prove to have potential for implementation and eventually for scale up or not. And if not, you go back, or we go back in the Living Labs. Okay, that's an overview of the table 6 as it is in the deliverable. It seems complex, but actually it's, well, we think it is not, because the idea was to facilitate it and to create a kind of navigation map through the methods. So all the methods are presented in the toolbox. They are presented. Focus on these 3 questions. Why this method? What are they for? And how to use them, okay? Why this method? For instance, for emphasize, for creating empathy with actors, or for giving shape to ideas, or to frame problems. The methods can be helpful to break down barriers in the first stages, to foster innovation in the intermediate and later stages. What are they for? For facilitating the engaging of the stakeholders, the actors, also to facilitating the tackling of complex problems that can be technical, but also social. Of course, there is a very important dimension, that is social dimension, the social interactions in the Living Labs, and to create this shared ownership. This can be also challenging, because the solutions should be collective, and sometimes it's normal. As human, some actors or some stakeholders might kind of appropriate about the solutions. So how to use them? We prepare these templates that are not our creation. They are available on other and books and other tools that were developed by previous projects. There are 3 or 4 previous projects, special one, the Code, and maybe 2 or 3 more, that actually produced very relevant and very systematic and organized methods, and connect these methods with the different stages of the co-creation journey. We will put some examples, but they are imperfect, okay? Don't be mad with us, because this is just for illustrative purposes. When the templates are filled with some words or some content, the content is in red, because it's actually content that is just for exemplifying, and we need to go even in loose abolition. Then, of course, we will have the templates filled in a different way. Actually, it would be very interesting if the facilitators, and Jonathan referred that in the previous webinar, keep everything, document everything. So then we can also share. You can share among the various teams of facilitators. You can share with all the project. It depends on the situations. And we will learn from your experience. So stakeholder mapping that we start on the last session, just to introduce you also to these digital collaborative platforms. Stakeholder mapping is very important for facilitators, because facilitators need to be aware of all the actors and the stakeholders, and to ensure they are all identified and considered. Sometimes we think we know everybody, but that's not normally completely accurate, okay? Because this is our territorial living labs, large communities, very different heterogeneous actors and stakeholders. So it's very important that facilitators are identifying all of them and considering all of them. Okay, that will promote inclusive living labs or inclusiveness. That's one of the main features of the living labs, and that also that the solutions that are being developed and will be developed for soil health and living soil are context aware. Okay, that we take in consideration all the key actors. What is for instance, stakeholder map is to map actors, and so we can move. Yes, okay. We could move for the next slide. Please be aware that the filling in red color is just tentative. It's provisional. It's okay. So stakeholder mapping is a very simple tool, and you could use it in paper pen, or you can use this digital collaborative platforms. The digital collaborative platforms have an advantage. It is the fact they have already a lot of templates there, so you can use the templates they have. Well, we will discuss maybe not today the problem of the costs for having completely access to this. So you need to or you can add other dimensions, but basically it's very important to map the stakeholders and the actors and stakeholders according their influence, if they are influence, especially for the solutions development, for the solutions implementation, and also their interest, if they are less or more interested. Okay, so this part, called the right upper quadrant, of course, is the more important, the ones that you have to manage closely. But then there is also this that you need to keep informed, the ones, the community more broadly. And then you also have to be aware and of the stakeholders that are also very interested on the project. That can be that is important to understand if they are satisfied with the information that we provide them about, even if they are not active participants on the project. So, but that is the thing that you have to train yourself. Then you can discuss, replace, check, and with your practice, with your own interaction with the stakeholders, you will try and you will see which one are the groups that you need to manage closely. You just need to keep informed. You need to monitor. You need to keep satisfied. Of course, there is overlapping between these groups, and some can be in this. This is very well feeling, but actually, some of the actors and stakeholders might be in these frontiers or lines. Another interesting method is the problem definition canvas. And I think this is important. Why? For problem definition, to frame well the problem, to define and structure the problem, and to ensure a shared understanding of the problem, okay, before moving to ideation. Because there is a risk that people go through the ideation to idealization of solutions with different problems in their minds. So if they have different problems in their minds, that will be much more complicated to get to solutions that can be shared and can be accepted by all the actors. So I think we can move. Emily, please. So the problem definition canvas. So as you see, it's also filled in red, but it's just a tentative, filling. But it's very important to be filled, and in this case, it should be filled collectively. It's not so much an individual or facilitator team's exercise. It's about, this is very important, to formulate the problem. It's very important that you are sure that before moving to the ideation, to developing ideas to solve the problems, that the problem is well defined, and especially that is a shared problem, that all the participants are sharing this problem. Okay. Then, if you have formulated the problem with your community, Living Lab community, then of course you can collect more information regarding the user needs. So how we are going to answer this problem? Which are the user needs? Which are the pain points or difficulties and the insecurities, and which is the evidence available, especially from science and also from the practice? And how might we, how can this problem be transformed in an opportunity for innovation? So that is already the part that connects with the ideation, creating ideas, finding solutions, shaping solutions. That's why the ball, it's here. Okay. Can move. And to the ideas, there is this method, the idea cards. It's a very simple one. That's why we selected. And what is for to consolidate ideas in a clear format, addressing the challenge in proposing solution, making explicit the expected impact and how it's going to be implemented. It facilitates actor feedback. And why? Because it's visual, simple, and ensure the proposals to be well documented, okay, and line up with the sustainability goals. So can we move to the template, please? So this is the standard template that we borrow from the Syscode handbook, but of course you can adapt it, especially if you have you are using the paid version of the digital collaborative tools, or if you are using paper and pen, even easier, you can change, of course, and adapt the terms. Of course, these terms that are in red color, I think they should be kept because they are important. But then the questions can be a little changed. So, which is the challenge that should come from the previous, the identification of the problems, and then the solution connected with the needs, and then the ideas to identify ideas, which are the ideas. So you can have 5 ideas, 5 idea cards you can do, like you have for Living Labs ID cards. Maybe some of you, not all of you, have been involved in the creation of this Living Lab identification cards. So now it's interesting to have an idea card for different ideas, the ideas that will be considered. Then the testing of solution in real-world conditions. You can use the experimentation canvas. There are other methods. This is important, especially at the experimental sites level. Why? Because it will provide a structured and systematic approach for prototyping and testing solution, ensure the real-world validation through the actor involvement. It's very important to ensure the actor involvement, the interactive learning, and of course the data-driven feedback. And that's why the experimental sites will combine a lot this data intelligence with the people intelligence. We can say that way. Okay. So it's the more complicated template now, more wordings. That experimentation canvas, basically, which is the objective of the experience, which the target group or community involved. You can do this for experimental site, for instance. All the living labs have now very well-defined experimental sites, can be 10, 15. I don't know exactly the number of experimental sites per living lab. The target group, community involved, key points to be agreed between the partners, main activities, and who does what to distribute the tasks and the responsibilities. The timeline and the important steps should be connected with roadmaps or specific roadmaps that you can create for developing of particular ideas that come from the stage previously. And then also be attentive to understand which are the resources, the tools, and the prototypes. I wouldn't call it customer segments. I would call more user segments. So we can change this. And then in the third level, where it will be tested what scale. In our case, it's already defined for the LivingSoiLL, the experimental sites. When is the experiment a success? Well, that is a very important question that needs the involvement of the participants. Okay? I will observe and record results. There's, of course, different ways to do that, to document the results. And it's also coming from other working package, namely from working package 3 and for your work on under the working package 4, the Living Labs operation. And always to create a to-do list or a next step to go through the testing phase. Well, just to finish, the toolbox also offer you this collection of methods and tools, but also provides this systematization according to transversal methods. So we have methods that are more focused on brainstorming to boost common understandings, to boost the launch of new ideas, new solutions. Then the gamification, that they are already more known. That is, for instance, the workshop, the participatory workshops with the post-its and this kind of stuff. It's more about creating a game. The digital collaborative tools. We already show you very superficial, of course, the the mural. We are going to use the mural in the in-person training, but of course you can use others like mural and mural, which, well, they're quite similar. I'm not an expert, but if you go through the comments, well, there are pros and cons in both, but actually, even in pricing, they are quite similar. And then we have this the interactive co-creation cycles. That is a very important part of the tools for the facilitators that need to be aware of this interactive nature of the co-creation journey. For instance, for the gamification techniques, you have already an example, and they're very well documented, and it's very interesting. The participatory workshop that is available for the Living Lab Luso Galician, or Luso Galaic, if you prefer. And you can find the video, the recording, and also the kind of briefing policy, practical brief on how to do it. So it's already an output of the LivingSoiLL. So the evaluation of the co-creation methods, I think we can let this for the next webinar, but it's very much about effectiveness, impacts, and the areas of improvement. So to ensure that co-creation remains dynamic, participatory, and results-oriented. So as practical tips, we could highlight that all co-creation methods are available as editable templates for you in the shared folder. And you can print them, or you can edit them and changing the words, and then print them and use them in a paper pen, or can use in your computer, because you can use them digitally without resorting to the digital collaborative platforms. Digital collaborative forms can be very useful, but we need to see in each facilitator's team if they have access to it or not, and if the project can provide access to all the facilitators. We still have to check on that, okay? And the in-person training will help us to do that. So now I will give the stage to Jonathan, and he will share with us his thoughts, his comments, his experiences. Thank you, Jonathan, for joining today.
Okay, thank you, Livia. Can you hear me okay? Great. Well, that's a wealth of information and resources and tried and tested methods which you can call upon as you go through this process. And I would recommend diving back into this presentation and these methodologies that Livia has explained, and use them as tools. I think they are tools, but they are frameworks of thinking. So as much a list of actions that you don't necessarily have to tick off every single one, you know, make sure that you do everything. These are guidelines and approaches. And I think for me, what I took from all of that, and it's really interesting to see the differences in approach, but the commonalities of all of them. And for me, I see these stages of action as well as perception. So that means knowing what you're doing in each of these stages as you go through. And just to put this in my own words, or to interpret this sort of more personally, is simply the beginning is messy, as we talked about last week. Gather everything, dig up everything, and then from that point forward, it's essentially trying to look for clarity and commonality. And so that stage is, okay, you've got all of the pieces on your table, and then you begin to arrange them and group this information into patterns that you might see, and it's a lot of sort of arranging of the information, digesting of that. But this idea of moving from chaos into order, right? Now that means literally at the beginning, you have to accept that what you're doing is piloting through chaos. But then at the second step, you're trying to form patterns. You're trying to form order from chaos. But then there's a third stage, which is a creative stage. And that's really where the design thinking comes in. Is, okay, we've got this evidence. Now we think we have a hypothesis, perhaps. And what can we do to experiment or to prove that hypothesis? What methods do we need to then prove these hypotheses? And then only at the end do we become objective and try to implement and test and experiment back in the field, and go back to these original ideas from this multi-sector, multidisciplinary, multi-scalar environment. So that's really these four stages of gather, of define, of design, and then experiment, implement. So at each one of those stages, you've got to be a different actor yourself as a facilitator. So you've got four hats, you put them on in series: chaos, clarity, design, and science, right? So I think it's important to do those things in order, to build the evidence, to be able to find common threads which you can weave, and then actually find, with that wealth of knowledge, you can be creative then, and then scientific. And I think in some ways, it's really important to think of these things as cycles, right? So there's something called the spiral mode of development, which is very common to systems design or technology design, where you create the whole thing really quickly, really fast, and then you throw it away and redesign again and do the whole process. So the first iteration is designed to be temporary. You make it out of sellotape and out of spaghetti, and it's not going to last, but at least you see the whole project in one. And each time you cut off the things that you don't need, right? So that's a spiral mode of development. But that really is the scientific method as well. So much of what we're doing here, of going from messy to more clarity, from mess to clarity, is going from subjective to objective, which is the scientific method, which also is not linear. It cycles back right? As you trial and error. But that scientific method is brilliant because it itself has been tried and tested, and it is based on questions. So at this stage, we're still in the messy stage. And I think that knowing where we're going into the future to clarity, we need to have that scientific method. So the questions, the really annoying bit that makes you a really good facilitator is asking over and over again the same question, right? And not giving up. So that's the Socratic method. And it goes a little bit like this. Okay, so what's the problem? Right? Or you even start at the beginning. Who are you? And what's the problem? Right? And somebody will say, okay, my problem is this. And then you say the really annoying bit, yeah, but why? And then they have to go back again and say, okay, I know what my problem is, but why do I have that problem? And then you say again, yeah, but why? And you keep going back, digging, being really annoying until the person can't answer anymore. And that's the depth. That's where the wealth of information comes from. And that's the beginning of the gathering stage. So it's, only after you can do that, only after you've done that with farmers in the field, with scientific, cultural, heritage institutions, and something I didn't quite mention last week is the politicians as well. Because when we're doing this mapping, we can understand the stakeholders as to those who have to face the problem in the field. But the politicians are very much a part of this. In fact, their job is to be a facilitator and to create the policy and to answer the questions why. So in theory, the politicians have already done your job, and ask them for their public process. So this is the multi-scalar part, the multi-actor part, and the multi-sector part in that gathering stage of be the really annoying one to ask and do the digging and ask the questions over and over again. So I think one way to do that also is to think of the subject on trial. So our subject is, what are the drivers of sustainable soil management innovation? Right? So our subject is soil, healthy soil. And so if we put soil on trial, and you're in a courtroom, and there's the judge and the jury, and you say, I say that it's the farmer's fault that the soil is so bad. All right, let's get the farmer up there. And somebody might say, actually, it's just the soil's fault. So let's get the soil up there. Let's get the politicians up there. But question, put all of these factors on trial and see what they have to say. But remember the subject, which is healthy soil. I think once we have that, a little bit of the mapping, gathering done, then it's really, how do we form clarity and commonality? And that's a wonderful process, because you start to see, you weave together the knowledge that is interpreting the languages, interpreting the types of ideas and matching them. And I think at that stage, it's quite interesting to see that people define the same problem using different language. And it can be very, very revealing. And then comes the fun stage, which is design, right? But you're not allowed to have fun until you get to that stage, right? You've got to be first annoying, then you've got to be a little bit more common sense, and then it's creativity time. You're not allowed to be creative in the beginning. Okay, so knowing where you are and these approaches at each of these stages, I think, is a really good thing to remember as you go through, and it takes the weight off your shoulders as well. You don't have to find a solution at the same time as finding the problem. Okay, so just thinking in these sorts of patterns. And then finally, when it comes to experimentation, you know, then you're a scientist again, then we're back in the field, really looking at a clear problem, and you might be wrong. Okay, so no hope allowed at that stage. You have to be objective at that stage, and then we come back to the beginning again. So it's a cycle. I particularly really appreciate the methodologies that you've put together, Livia, Emily, and it's going to be really fun when we get to that design thinking. But each to their own, there will be different methods, different approaches, different ways to gather information. But again, document everything, because that allows you the wealth of information to then find clarity. So when you're out there, find a way to document, and that can also be a creative process too. Okay, I think I'll stop there, but just all I wanted to say is know where you're at each stage, and just embody that role as you go through. Okay, I'll stop there. I think in a few days time I'll have actually some slides for you.
Sorry, Jonathan, because we couldn't hear you very well.
And some examples from other European projects too. But yeah, thank you so much. The toolbox. I was just saying thank you for the toolboxes. And I'll have some slides for you next time. Okay.
Okay. For the next webinar, or we can include this if you for the next. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jonathan. It was a very insightful and very useful, I guess, talk, also inspirational, but mostly I think it was practical tips for the facilitators and to reflect also on all this. And it can be a lot and it can be overwhelming, of course, but I think you have done it more easily. And making people understanding that actually some messiness is needed before going to the solutions, to the results. Okay, thank you. And now we have some time for questions. If you have some clarifications or real questions, comments, please. The stage is yours. Someone to break the ice? I think you are a little overwhelmed now after Jonathan talk.
I want to thank again to Jonathan and Livia for the presentations. They were really insightful, as you said. And yes, we are a little bit overwhelmed by all the methods that you present, but I guess we will know how to use it when we start to really going on it. But I have one question with the stakeholder mapping. When you prepare the different quadrants, you put I don't know how to say. For instance, here in Ubigo, you put the Ubigo as a whole, or you have to put all the persons that form this Ubigo team, for instance, in its place. I don't know if I'm explaining myself or not.
Yeah, it's very clear, Marina, actually, because that was in a non-editable format, but it's obviously that is not the institution. It's more about, for instance, the experimental sites and the partners involved in the experimentation, and the others that are not directly involved in experimentation that you need to mobilize also. And you need to see if they need to be involved, to be informed. There will be actually a practical challenge because we are experimenting living lab. Some living labs don't have that dimension. And of course, experimentation is happening based on the science premises. And that can entail some well, it's the role of facilitators, try to understand, well, not overwhelming the experimental sites with, with the users, but not leaving the experimental sites going alone. And in the end, just find out that what they are doing is not what the users want. So you need to manage this matching, trying not overwhelming both sides, but I think it's a thing that you are going also, as Jonathan say, try and error, and after a while you can fine tune the best way to manage. But your question is very pertinent. No, it's not about the institution. It's about especially this challenging of in the four topest quadrant to connect co-creation and experimenting.
Yeah. But for instance, I use Ubigo as an example, but I mean, for the winery, I put the winery as a whole or each participant in each quadrant. For instance, in some wineries, we have some actors that are more involved than others because their role in the company or something. So we have to divide them in this stakeholder mapping, or they are a winery as a whole.
I think I understand your question, and it's also a very relevant one. I think you can identify persons and link them to the organizations. I think that's the question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much about persons, of course. Yeah. It's about organizations that have duties and roles, especially in the case of the partners that have funding. But it's very much about people, persons, individuals. Yeah, sure.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Marina. More questions? I don't know, Jonathan, if you want to add something to the Marina question.
Just to say, I agree with that response, that it's about the people. You know, they wear the T-shirt that says their organization, but their organization is actually them, and it's their opinions. Also, I will show in a few days a stakeholder mapping done for the Icarus project, another European one. And it shows the links between the stakeholders as a weighting of influence, which is slightly different task to what we're doing now. Mm-hmm. But it's very interesting to see that a person in a winery may also be a maker may also be working with regenerative practice and driving that, but it's very much the person that is the connection rather than the institution. So I think that's a great comment from Livia, to find the people behind the name. Yeah.
And what Jonathan's, I can add a little. This is in the deliverable that we didn't develop here. That is kind of social network analysis. Actually, you don't need to know the method, but actually you can map the interactions between the actors. For instance, if you are going to talk to them, then you can understand who is the actor and who are the interactions of that actor, and then, well, you can try to see how is your network. So you can look at it. It's of course more time consuming. That's why we didn't present it in so much detail. But you can actually look at this living soil as a network, social network. And for that, you have to map all the interactions and try to also to understand what are these interactions. Are very intense or just bridging or mediating. Okay, it's a method that is referred in the toolbox and can be very useful if you want to go in depth. I think it can be very useful for the success of the other activities, actually, yes. Do we have more questions? Well, actually, if we don't have more questions, I think we can finish here. And please bear in mind that we have the 4 webinar on Wednesday, and it's a webinar that we need your contributions, because actually the co-creation assessment is a emerging area in science, so there is not much on this, because there is basically we are using evidence from other areas, from other topics, to bring it here. And we have a question from Giovanni.
Yes. Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question related to the meeting we have scheduled for the communication dissemination activities. Maybe you know about it, if there's already a established date or not, because should be this week, I think.
Sorry, I don't know if I understood well. What is the communication and dissemination? What is, sorry?
It refers to the activity of promotion of the project through social media channels, but maybe you know something about it, or I have to ask directly to Carolina, maybe.
Okay, but it's overlapping with our webinar on Wednesday?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
But we use the doodle to
Okay,
express
probably.
preferences.
Okay, probably you are referring to the working package 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, but maybe it's the wrong place to ask. Sorry.
No, maybe not. I mean, I didn't understood very well what was the question.
No, well, the question is that we should have a meeting this week, but we don't know yet the exact day.
Okay, so I cannot answer.
Okay.
Sorry.
Fine, thank you.
Okay. We have a newcomer, Anna. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself. Or...
Yes. Hello. Hello, I am from Poland, from the Management Institute of WURS, and I am really new person in our project. So I am listening and I am learning a lot.
Okay, thank you, Elena. So if there is no more questions, I think we can finish the webinar. Please bear in mind that we have the next webinar on Wednesday, 9 a.m. and that we will try to update the shared folder, so everything to be organized and you can easily to use the resources that have been provided by these webinars, by the toolbox. We will try to put the webinars in video in YouTube format. I don't know how much time it will take. We are talking to Innova Mais to see if they do it or we have to do it ourselves. We'll see. But soon everything will be there. And then we will have in-person trainings and we can organize it more customized to the needs of each facilitator teams. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Jonathan, for joining again and for such an insightful talk. And thank you all the participants, because I know there are some overlapping activities, especially in the Italian case. And see you on Wednesday. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.